Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Planning Commission regular hearing for Thursday, December 15th, 2016. I'd like to remind members of the public that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence your mobile devices that may sound off during these proceedings. And when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Fong.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
And Commissioner Melgar.
Here.
We do expect Commissioner Richards and more to arrive shortly. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. There are no items proposed for continuance. So we will move on to your consent calendar. All matters listed here under constitute a consent calendar, are considered to be routine by the Planning Commission and may be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the Commission. There will be no separate discussion of this item unless a member of the Commission, the public, or staff so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item at this or a future hearing. Item 1 for case number 2015-004567 CUA at 470 West Portal Avenue, conditional use authorization. I have no speaker cards.
Is there any public comment on the one item on the consent calendar? Not seeing any public comments. Closed. Commissioner Johnson. Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to approve item 1 under your consent calendar, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
And Commissioner President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 4-0 and places you on Commission matters. Item 2, consideration of adoption draft minutes for the December 1st hearing.
Is there any public comment on the draft minutes? Not seeing any public comments. Closed. And Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve. Draft minutes of December 1st, 2016.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt the minutes for December 1st, 2016, Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 4-0 and places you on item 3, Commission comments and questions.
Doesn't appear we have any today.
Very good, then, Commissioners. That'll place us under your department matters. Item 4, Director's announcements.
There's no new announcements today. Thank you.
Item 5, review of past events of the Board of Supervisors, Board of Appeals, and the Historic Preservation Commission. There appear to be no updates, and maybe we'll return to that later. Commissioners, that'll place us under general public comment. Not to exceed a period of 15 minutes. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Jonas. A few cards here, speaker cards. Georgia Shudish, Rupa Bozi, Dee Seligman, and Tom Borden.
I brought my Christmas letter for you. There's one for Commissioner Hillis, but he's not here, so maybe you can just leave it for him. For next year, good luck for everybody. I want to talk about what my wish list, or a wish list is. For tantamount to demolition, I think Section 317 needs to be strengthened, not abolished. The original intent of this planning code section was to allow for alteration permits, not demolitions. The line has been pushed, stretched, and crossed by developers. The relative affordability and character of all our residential neighborhoods is at risk without stronger and clearer calculations. Consideration should be given to qualitative definitions as well as quantitative ones. I also have 7 suggestions for any revised residential design guidelines. Monthly discretionary review hearings, put them all together. You could even have the neighborhood, the residential CUAs together. And then there's another one. Just as another note, last week when we were all been thinking about what happened in Oakland, and I was glad that Commissioner Moore made the point about the PDR, and that made me think back to the past like you do at this time of year. Can I have the overhead, please? This is from the final EIR for First and Mission, and that was finalized September 12th, 1985. This is what used to be there across from the Trans Bay. If you came from the East Bay and you walked to the west, that's what you'd see until it was all torn down. And this building I've circled, and you have in your packet with the other pictures of the block and the information from the FEIR, this was artists' places. This was for artists. And it's gone now, and a lot of stuff in the South of Market's gone, and that's, ancient history. But I just felt it was something to think about. I know it's over 30 years ago, and I guess we're dating myself, but I remember those buildings, and I knew there were artists in there, and I think some of them even lived there. So sometimes it's good to look back and think about what we've lost and what we can keep, and that's why it's there. There's also a picture in the group from the 1940s, which is kind of cool. Anyway, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, all the best for the holidays to you and the staff, and thank you for all your hard work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jonas, it's for the minutes. Oops, sorry. Thank you.
Tom, did you want to speak on, nice to see you. You want to speak on item number 6 or general public comment? Okay, great.
Hey, Rodney.
Yep.
I have some copies for you guys. Commissioners, President Fong, my name is Tom Borden. I'm an engineer, and I have some comments on the SINRAMP EIR. I provided you with some documents that explain why the EIR is not adequate or accurate.
Tom, I believe that your comments are pertaining to 1500 Mission Street, right? Which is...
No, to the EIR you'll be discussing this afternoon in your joint meeting.
So this is, you're going to have to wait for that item to be called.
That item's not on this
sorry.
agenda, is it?
Yeah, I apologize, Commissioner President Fong. That item is not on this agenda. It is
Correct.
at the next joint hearing, so he does have the opportunity to speak to the SINRAMP. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, is that okay?
Yep.
All right, thanks. All right, here we go again. So at any rate, I'd like to highlight 2 of the many items that contain in this work that took me a couple of weeks to do, to highlight 2 of the issues that make the EIR unfit for certification. The EIR claims the plan will result in an increase in sequestered carbon. You don't have to be a scientist to realize that cutting down 18,000 trees and replacing them with grass and shrubs will have the opposite effect. Using the Cal-EE mod calculations cited by the EIR, the implementation would result in a net loss of 73,000 metric tons of CO2 storage. In addition, the EIR fails to account for emissions from trucks and logging equipment used for plan implementation and maintenance. The greenhouse gas figures presented in the EIR are willfully miscalculated to claim an increase in stored carbon. Let's look at an example. In Sharp Park, 56 acres of forest will be clear-cut and replaced with grassland. Cal-EE mod uses sequestration figures of 111 metric tons of CO2 stored in an acre of forest and only 4.3 metric tons of CO2 stored in an acre of grassland. So this land use change would release 6,000 metric tons of CO2. The EIR claims the grassland will actually sequester more carbon than the forest. This is false, as are all the other greenhouse gas calculations in the EIR. Is 73,000 metric tons or even 6,000 metric tons significant in terms of CEQA? Yes. The emissions run counter to San Francisco's 2008 greenhouse gas ordinance and California AB 32. Under CEQA, any greenhouse gas release is significant if it conflicts with any applicable plan, policy, or regulation of an agency adopted for the purpose of reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases. I'm going to continue on because we didn't get started right away. Another issue I'd like to highlight is the failure to address a significant impact on recreation. The SINRAMP intends to limit public access to on-trail use only. Trails cover less than 5% of that parkland. The other 95% will become off-limits to the public. This is a drastic change from the free access we enjoy today. The EIR presents public comments on this but fails to identify it as an impact. Closing off 95% of our wild parkland is definitely a significant impact. After all the time and money that has been spent on this EIR, there must be tremendous pressure to just say yes. However, certifying this flawed document will lead to bad decisions and increased controversy over the Natural Areas Program. your judgment on the EIR is not a judgment on the program. In other words, I would just say, Joe Friday would say, just the facts, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional general public comment?
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Rupa Bose, and I also want to address the EIR for the Natural Areas Plan. The Planning Commission should be presented with EIRs that are accurate, adequate, and objective. This is not true of the EIR for the Natural Areas Plan. I want to talk about two of the many flaws. First, the assertion of no increase in herbicide use. Second, the one-to-one tree replacement. In April this year, the SF Department of Environment changed its herbicide use guidelines. Since then, SF Rec and Park has very sharply all but eliminated its herbicide use. But this is not true of the Natural Areas program, where herbicide use has been reduced far less. From May through October, that is after that change in guidelines, they ended up using 2/3 of the Tier 1 chemicals used by SF Rec and Park, excluding Harding Park. So when you have 18,000 trees being cut down and the stumps being treated with herbicides, as the plan calls for, there is no way that there isn't going to be a massive increase in herbicides, especially since we have evidence that the Natural Areas program is quite willing to use them. Secondly, the EIR talks of a one-to-one replacement of trees, which was not in the underlying plan. At present, there's no proper record of the trees cut down with size, species, and location. There's no way to verify that the replacement's actually happening. At the very least, the EIR should be sent back to incorporate a detailed mitigation measure requiring proper record keeping and accountability. In the response to comment section of the EIR, it says that all removed trees will be replaced on a roughly one-to-one basis, but not necessarily at the same location or within the same natural area. The actual project only says the trees in the San Francisco natural areas would be replaced with either native trees or native vegetation such as scrub or grassland species. In any case, when a tree is removed from a specific location, it impacts that area. In McLaren Park, for instance, the trees lie between the freeway and dense residential areas and help improve air quality for residents. If over 800 trees are removed and, for argument's sake, replanted in Golden Gate Park, the impact would be significant. But the EIR doesn't address this. Furthermore, replacement with a sapling does not have the same effect, whether aesthetically or in its ecological benefits, of a 100-year-old mature tree. In Glen Canyon, only a few large native trees are to be planted in the natural areas. It's mostly shrubs or small trees, which do not have the same benefits as the 100 mature trees that were removed. Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment? Okay, not seeing any public comments closed.
Very good, Commissioners. It'll place us under your regular calendar on item 6. For case number 2014-000362 ENV at 1500 Mission Street, this is the draft environmental impact report.
Jonas, would you mind handing that up to the Commissioners? Thank you. Good morning, President Fong and members of the Commission. I am Chelsea Fordham, Planning Department staff. The item before you is review and comment on the 1500 Mission Street Draft Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and San Francisco's local procedures for implementing CEQA. The item before you is the public hearing to receive comments on the Draft Environmental Impact Report, or draft EIR, for the 1500 Mission Street project. I am joined here today by my colleagues, Wade Whitgraf, Senior Environmental Planner, Tina Tam and Pilar LaValle, Preservation staff, and members of the consultant team and project sponsor team are also present today. The project site is located at 1500 Mission Street, which is located on the north side of Mission, with South Van Ness Avenue to the west, 11th Street to the east, and within the South of Market neighborhood of San Francisco. The site is currently developed with 2 buildings, including an existing retail building at 1580 Mission and a warehouse building at 1500 Mission. The proposed project includes demolition of an existing retail building at 1580 and the partial demolition and partial retention of the existing warehouse at 1500 Mission Street, and construction of a mixed-use development with 2 project components, and one, an approximately 400-foot tall tower of residential and retail uses at the corner of South Van Ness and Mission, and an approximately 250-foot tall office and permit center building for the city and county of San Francisco between 11th Street on the 11th between Market and Mission. In sum, the 2 components would result in a total of 560 dwelling units, about 38,000 gross square feet of commercial space, and 567,000 square feet of office and childcare space. Also included would be off-street parking for 420 vehicles, 530 bicycles, and 58,000 gross square feet of public and common open space. The draft EIR concluded that the proposed project would result in 2 significant and unavoidable impacts, including a project-specific impact to historic architectural resources and a cumulative impact related to transportation and circulation. The draft EIR found that other impacts to archaeological and tribal cultural resources, air quality, transportation and circulation, noise, inadvertent discovery of paleontological resources, and hazardous materials could be mitigated to a less than significant level. A hearing to receive the Historic Preservation Commission's comments on the draft EIR was held last week on December 7th. I have provided you with a copy of the HPC's comment letter. At the hearing, the HPC agreed that the DEIR analyzed an appropriate range of preservation alternatives to address the historic resource impact. Further, the HPC commented that they appreciated that the preservation alternatives not only avoided some or all of the identified significant impacts, but also met or partially met the project objectives. Further comments were in regards to the project and the project approvals. Today, comments should be directed towards the adequacy and accuracy of information contained in the draft EIR. Comments on the merits of the project will be heard following this hearing during the public comment period on the next agenda items. For members of the public who wish to speak on the draft EIR, please state your name for the record. Staff is not here to answer comments today. Comments will be transcribed and responded to in writing in the comments and responses document, which will respond to all verbal and written comments received and make revisions to the draft EIR as appropriate. Those who are interested in commenting on the draft EIR in writing by email may submit their comments to the Environmental Review Officer at 1650 Mission, Suite 400, San Francisco by 5 p.m. on January 4th, 2017. After the comment period ends on January 4th, the Planning Department will prepare a comments and responses document which will contain our responses to all relevant comments on the draft EIR heard today and sent in writing to the Planning Department. We anticipate publication of the comments and responses document early spring of next year, followed by an EIR certification hearing, also early spring of 2017. And unless the commissioners have questions, I would respectfully suggest that the public hearing on this item be opened.
Okay.
I have no speaker cards.
Okay, opening it up to public comment. Not seeing any. Public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore?
I'd like to ask that in the historic preservation discussion of the 1500 Mission building, that you include historic photos of the building, that when it comes to the final EIR will make it easier for people who are interested to comment to see what it was like. The building has slightly been altered over time, and there could be an emphasis on those elements that will be particularly integrated. We all have seen the first discussion on the building, which does a very nice job of recognizing the importance of the building, but further elaboration on the background, historic photos would be very helpful, including where the main entrances were, so that we have a really better appreciation of what it's really doing. The second thing I would like to ask, and I think it falls under historic preservation, is the issue of a streetcar spur, which is basically the T line. No, it's a J. The J line has a pushback onto 11th Street, which is a very interesting phenomenon. I took a picture of it one day when I was walking up the street, and as I was coming up for Mission, there was an old streetcar standing on 11th Street. That was such an incredible compliment for celebrating the new civic office presence on 11th Street that I would like to see that the historic spurs, better explained in the EIR, together that the streetscape plan for 11th Street figures out of how we can have a historic marker there about this phenomenon and potentially even a place where tourists can stop and experience the streetcar just as you experience the turnaround of the cable car on Powell Street. It's a great experience because normally you see that thing just moving up and down Market Street. You can never really touch or feel it. And that when I saw it, I was so surprised that I thought it would be a real great innovation and invitation for also certain retail to have a little restaurant which focuses on this thing. I cannot ask that there will be a stop where you could jump onto it, but that would be obviously a great idea. I don't think it's quite set up that way, but for it to be standing there was just amazing to me. So they do that when they have basically congestion. They pull that spur, that puts the car on that spur, and I'd like you to explain that a little bit more in the EIR. Otherwise, I am comfortable with where you're going. I think it is thorough and covers all those things that I, from my perspective, would need to know about. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, Commissioners, we can move on to items 7A and B for case numbers 2014-00362 GPA and MAP and PCA. Intent to initiate general plan amendments related to planning code, text, and zoning map amendments to facilitate the creation of the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District, and the intent to initiate planning code, text, and zoning map amendments related to the creation of the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District. These are intents to initiate.
Good morning, President Fong, members of the Planning Commission, Tina Chang, Planning Department staff. The actions before you today, as Jonas mentioned, are the initiation of 2 ordinances related to the 1500 Mission Street development, also known as the Goodwill Site Project. The initiation allows the Commission to consider adoption of the proposed amendments on a future date, likely around March 2017. No action on the project will occur at this time. The first ordinance is for the general plan amendments, which would modify 2 maps. Map 3, the height map of the Market and Octavia plan, and Map 5, the height and bulk map of the downtown area plan. The height and bulks on these maps would be amended for consistency with the proposed 1500 Mission Street Special Use District, which you heard a bit about during the October 27th informational hearing. The second ordinance is for amendments to the planning code text and zoning map amendments to facilitate the special use district I just mentioned. The amendments would, 1, amend the height and bulk map to reflect the proposed heights mentioned in your case reports, amend special use district map to reflect the boundaries of the special use district, and finally establish a new section for the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District, which would most relevantly allow for parking for the city's fleet in excess of what is currently permitted, allow office uses above the 4th floor as a contingency should the city not occupy the office building, and modify bulk controls allowing for larger floor plates owing to the unique needs of the city permit center and also to address the particularly windy conditions in the area. The SUD also includes a few other amendments as included in your case reports. It should be noted that the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District would supersede the Van Ness and Market Downtown Residential Special Use District for the 2 affected parcels. We expect the adoption of the general plan and the planning code amendments to come before the Commission around March of 2017. At the adoption hearing, the Planning Commission would consider the project in its entirety. You've heard about the project before, and the project description was just described to you, and it's also in your case reports. To date, the department has not received any public comments on the project, and the department recommends that the commission adopt the draft resolution so that the commission may initiate the planning code and general plan amendment ordinances. To clarify, no action on the project itself will occur as a result of the initiation. It just allows the commission to consider the legislation for adoption in the future. This concludes the staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a project sponsor? No. Straight to public comment? Sorry.
The city is the sponsor.
Yeah.
So.
Straight to so, okay, yeah. Public comment, please. Thank you.
Sue Hester, I didn't even have time to get my glasses cleaned off. I'm commenting on the initiation because this is serious. The planning department is going to use the EAR, which I will submit extensive comments on, to decide whether to rezone another time this area. Every time that the planning department does an area plan, it says it has adopted perfect information that people should use in the next wave of evaluations of projects in various area plans. And this is one of them. We have gone through planning efforts for the area around Mission, South Van Ness, Market, Van Ness, and that general area repeatedly, going back about 20 years. And every time you say you have perfect information, you don't. One of the really difficult questions that you have to face not only is the rezoning to make the planning department more happy by having a new building, but traffic. And the traffic situation in the area, they're also calling it the hub, is out of control, as is the traffic situation near my office, which is between 4th and 5th on Market. We have a lot of unregulated buses, the Google buses, and Lyft and Uber, and we have regulated vehicles from the Muni and the taxi cabs. And we also have unregulated vehicles like the empty buses that wander around all over Hellingen for Academy of Art University. Last night, I talked to the head of MTA about what information the city has developed and has to measure how vehicles move on the streets right now. And there is a satellite tracking device that has information on where the munis are. No one knows where the Lyfts and the Ubers are. They're entirely a pit of anarchy. And anyone who doesn't recognize that and recognize the impacts it's going to have on this site is not paying attention. They don't follow any laws, and they're not popped for it by the DMV. Pardon me. Anyone in the city doesn't find them. So we will have a vacation and come back in January. Thank you.
Any additional public comment?
Hi, this is probably a procedural issue more than anything, but for the 470 West Portal Avenue hearing, I didn't realize it was the first item on the agenda, so I'm just wondering if there's any way for neighbors to get comments in there?
It's already been heard and was approved.
So there's nothing that the neighbors can do at this point?
You can appeal the project, but at this time, the project has already been considered by the Planning Commission and already approved under the consent calendar. You can still submit public comment under the general public comment portion at the end of the calendar, but the decision has already been rendered. So at this point, you can appeal it to the Board of Supervisors if
Board of
you so wish.
Supervisors?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
For item 7.
For item 7. Okay, not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment on the transportation impacts, which actually are analyzed in the draft EIR. And this is a challenging site, and I actually think that development will bring, a little bit more order to the area than what it is right now, which is kind of a Wild West with people trying to find parking, kind of a semi-industrial use of the Goodwill site. And so I think that having the city site here will actually be a little bit more orderly for the entire area than sort of the scattered nature of the city properties today. So I actually appreciate this project. I like that it has residential in it. I think it's a great mixed-use project. I'm particularly excited about the child care facilities. And my one question for staff is the HPC had given comment that the preservation alternative, either full or partial, were preferable than the project alternative, which would result in demolishment of 1500 Mission Street. But these general plan amendments are for the proposed project, which is for demolition. So I'd like to ask staff, what? Oh, sorry. So I'd like to ask staff if you all could comment on how the preservation alternative, either full or partial, could be integrated into the project given the amendments that we're being asked to make today.
I think, the short answer is that the commission has there are a series of alternatives, as there always are.
Yeah.
And the project sponsor's preferred alternative is one of those four. And the HPC weighed in on that fact. When it comes to you, you will have to then look at those various alternatives and make your decision.
Okay. Well, I'm just in March, so the project's still going to come to us. I'm just making sure that the map amendments and the planning code text amendments account for the potential to get to the preservation alternative projects, because they are slightly different. I know that the heights are slightly different in the office tower, in the preservation alternative, and there's different setbacks and things like that, and different amount of parking and all that other stuff.
Commissioners, Dan Sider with department staff. Thank you for that question. In the most general of terms, portions of the various alternatives could comply with the amendments as currently proposed. Not necessarily all of those options or alternatives could, and the amendments themselves could be modified either by you when you act on the amendments formally, or by the board subsequently, should one of those alternatives be selected.
Okay, so I see Commissioner Moore, but just a quick question on that. So we have to see the project, right? But let's say we go for the full preservation alternative, which calls for 1 story of underground parking, not 2. There's a setback on the office building. There's various changes, and it requires another amendment to the planning code text. Maybe the zoning map remains the same. Would we then? What action would we have to take? Because generally speaking, we can only initiate planning code text amendments in a hearing, and then we have to hear them again. So if we decided to take the preservation alternative for the project, or among maybe other changes, would that mean we'd have to initiate new amendments, potentially?
Commissioner, my understanding is that today's action, should you take it, is essentially an application. It's a filing almost, and that at the hearing to consider adoption or recommendation of adoption of those amendments, they can be changed themselves in whatever way you see fit, such that a new initiation would not be required.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. All right. Then move to initiate general plan amendments related to planning code text and zoning map and for 1500 Mission Street.
Second.
Commissioners, if we could also schedule a hearing on or after, is it March 16th, Tina? On March 16th.
Okay.
Very good, Commissioners. Then on that motion to initiate and schedule hearing, Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Fong?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 8 for case number 2015-006857 CUA at 4529 18th Street. This is a conditional use authorization.
Good morning, Commissioners. Erica Jackson, Planning Department staff. Before you is a request for conditional use authorization to reactivate a ground floor commercial tenant space located at 4529 18th Street. The project also includes a 2-story vertical addition on top of the existing single-story structure located at the front of the lot. The addition would expand the existing 1-bedroom dwelling unit to a family-sized 3-bedroom dwelling unit. The commercial unit is located along the street frontage and is currently occupied by an interior designer showroom and office. On June 16, 2016, the Planning Commission heard the proposed project and concerns by the surrounding neighbors. This project was continued to allow the project sponsor and neighbors time to work out a compromise regarding the mass and bulk of the proposed addition, as well as light, air, and privacy to the adjacent structures. The plans dated December 13, 2016, which are distributed to you now and via email earlier this week, represent the compromise worked out between the project sponsor and the neighbors. Since these plans were distributed, the neighbors and the project sponsor have identified 5 additional windows to be installed with privacy glass. In conclusion, this proposed project is necessary and desirable as it will create one family-sized dwelling unit and reactivate a commercial use that is compatible with other small-scale, limited commercial uses located in the vicinity. It promotes the continued operation of an established locally owned business and contributes to the viability of the neighborhood, and is consistent with the residential design guidelines, the planning code, and the general plan. Given the findings discussed above, staff recommends approval of the conditional use authorization for this project. Thank you. I'm available for questions.
Okay, project sponsor, please.
Hello, thank you to the Commission for reconsidering our project. My family has owned this building since 2008, and we did receive neighbor consensus for the design, so I'll go through it relatively quickly. I'll show how our proposal conforms to planning guidelines and also show how some of the big changes that we've made. First, we removed the 4th floor and replaced it with an angled stair access. Second, we did match all of the light wells. This is the 4th floor here. We matched all of the light wells. On this side, and then this light well up here. Third, we removed the eastern 3 feet of our building, shown here, creating a side setback. And fourth, we removed also a large section of the 3rd floor and then parts of the lower floors as well. We redesigned the facade to better integrate with the existing building, and we pushed back the deck handrail. This proposal has a smaller footprint than the existing building, and it also expands the mid-block by deleting a non-conforming structure. We would like to show that our proposal is well within the allowable envelope in the residential design guidelines. The planning guidelines recommend that upper levels be set back 15 feet. We now just have a roof access setback 20 feet. For a 2-building lot, code mandates at least a 30-foot rear yard. Our rear yard is 30 to 33, mostly 33 feet. And we are removing a non-conforming part of our existing building, which is about here. The residential design team recommended a 5-foot setback for the handrail. We now have a 7-foot setback from the cornice edge. And we redesigned the handrail as well. In our neighborhood planning code, it allows for 4 levels with a roof access. We now have 3 levels with a roof access. The code mandates a 40-foot maximum height, and our roof is 6 to 9 feet below that. The code is the roof I'm referring to here. The code allows for a 10-foot tall stair access. Our proposal has a 6-foot access because it's sunken into that roof. The residential design guidelines recommend that the access is minimally visible from the street and slopes to match the interior stairway. Our proposal does this. And since our stair access is entirely within the 40-foot buildable envelope, we've taken the liberty to add an angled wall, allowing for natural cooling and ventilation during hot or rainy weather. The addition of this angled wall is interior and does not impact light or visibility from the street. The residential design guidelines recommend for the back step downs into the mid-block. We've taken particular care here. Our proposal contains, this is the design guidelines. Our proposal contains these step downs for a 2-building lot. Code places a maximum height of 30 feet for this step down, and ours is 7 feet below that maximum height. Finally, I would like to note 2 privacy glazing additions. On the west, we will add privacy glazing to 2 rearward windows in the light well on the ground floor and in bedroom 3, which is up here. And to the east, finally, we will ensure the elimination of cross views. For the 2 windows currently shown with 5'6" privacy glazing, we will raise that if needed. Thank you. I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns that you have.
Thank you. Okay, opening up to public comment. Lokalani Devoni.
On behalf of the neighbors, we believe that this is an acceptable compromise given where we started initially on June 16th. We would ask that, as a condition of approval, the commissioners ask that the 5 windows that were referenced by staff be required to be glazed with privacy glass. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any additional public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Commissioner Moore.
I believe that the architect has addressed many of the concerns we have. I have one additional question for you, if you wouldn't mind. On the east side, how many feet are you staying off the property line?
We've set back the east side 3 feet.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
I think this is a win for the neighborhood when actually we have a compromise that comes before us to enshrine and let everybody move on and get on with their lives. This was pretty contentious 6 months ago. Just one comment to the project sponsor. How you carry out the final product on the building really is going to depend a lot on how the quality of the materials that you use. There's examples in the neighborhood, this is my neighborhood as well, where it's a false sense of history, where you try to put things back that just don't look right, and I would encourage you to please make sure that whatever you do try to do, it's in keeping with the spirit of the rest of the neighborhood and that they're quality materials. So I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. Are we including the condition requested by the
5 glazed windows as referenced?
Very good, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to approve this matter with conditions as amended to include a condition that the 5 windows identified by the architect and staff to be glazed with privacy glass. On that motion, Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commissioner President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 6-0. Commissioners, it'll place us on item 9 for case number 2014.1434 ENX at 950 Tennessee Street. This is a large project authorization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rich Sucre, Department staff. The project before you is a large project authorization for the proposed project at 950 Tennessee Street. Under the large project authorization, the project is seeking exemptions to the planning code requirements for 1 rear yard, 2 dwelling unit exposure, and 3 off-street parking. The proposed project entails the demolition of the existing 2-story industrial building and the new construction of a 4-story with basement, 40-foot tall residential building that includes 103 dwelling units, 87 off-street parking spaces, and 2 car share parking spaces. The project incorporates a common open space through a small roof deck, interior courtyard, and a publicly accessible mid-block passage. The project is located in the Dogpatch Landmark District, which is designated in Article 10 of the San Francisco Planning Code. As such, the project was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission on December 7, 2016. The HPC granted a certificate of appropriateness and found the project to be compatible infill new construction within a designated landmark district, as noted in HPC motion number 0296. To meet the inclusionary affordable housing program, the project sponsor has elected the affordable housing fee and/or a combination of participating in the recently passed small site acquisition program. The amount of the fee shall be based upon 33% of the total units. After analyzing all aspects of the project, department staff recommends approval with conditions. Specifically, the project complies with the applicable requirements of the planning code. The project is consistent with the objectives and policies of the general plan. The project is located in a zoning district where residential use is principally permitted. The project produces a new residential development with significant site upgrades, including landscaping, private and common open space, as well as a publicly accessible mid-block passage, which will be a benefit for the surrounding community. The project provides compatible infill new construction within the Dogpatch Landmark District and is supported by the Historic Preservation Commission. The project adds 103 new dwelling units to the city's housing stock, and the project will fully utilize the Eastern Neighborhood Area Plan controls and will pay the appropriate development impact fees. Passed out to you were copies of the presentation that the project sponsor provided, as well as a recent correspondence that I received from the neighborhood group, the Dogpatch Neighbor Association, this morning, discussing the project sponsor's intent to apply for an in-kind agreement to basically help support some of the neighborhood efforts. So the project sponsor is present and has prepared a presentation. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Juan Carlos Wallace. I'm the project sponsor, co-founder of Oryx Partners. Nice to see you again. So I just wanted to make a few, I don't know if you can see this yet, but share a few comments about the project, our process, and then hand it over to Glenn for a presentation on the design. A few key facts about the project. It is, as Rich mentioned, 103 units in a 4-story building in between Tennessee and Minnesota, in the heart of the Dogpatch. The project was approved unanimously by the HPC last week, and importantly, we are proposing a mid-block passage, which is not required per code, that connects Minnesota to Tennessee in the approximate location of the historic Kentucky Place, what used to be at this location until the early 1930s. This is an important aspect of the project for the community, which lacks significant open space, and we've committed to making it 24 hours publicly accessible as part of the conditions of approval of the motion. I wanted to share a little bit more about the community outreach process. Over the last 18 months, we've had over a dozen different official meetings with the DNA, their board, their design committee. We've incorporated a number of important changes to the project, ranging from making the mid-block passage wider, setbacks on both streets, setbacks at the 4th floor, details related to the landscaping and sidewalk improvements. As a result, the DNA did vote to endorse this at their community meeting a month ago. You saw 2 letters from them, one that had some additional conditions a couple of weeks ago. We've since worked with them to change some things in the project. We increased the number of 3 units in the three-bedroom units in the project. We also agreed, and you will have seen that in their letter this morning, we've agreed to language in the motion that would ensure that we are pursuing an in-kind agreement. We've discussed with the neighbors the possibility of bulb outs and crosswalks on Minnesota and Tennessee at the ends of the mid-block passage. There is further vetting that is required with some of the adjacent neighbors, which we will pursue. We know that the DNA is very interested in this, and we are pursuing this. We would, of course, go to the Eastern Neighborhood CAC and come back to the Planning Commission for ultimate approval of that. On the inclusionary side, as Rich mentioned, we are planning to pursue the small sites program similar to our recently approved project on Van Ness. For this site, that equates to 34 units that would need to be located within a mile radius of the site in close proximity, primarily Central Waterfront, Potrero Hill, Inner Mission, and parts of the Bayview are eligible. With that, I would like to pass it on to Glenn for a discussion of the design. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Monitor, please. Really interesting project. I think part of it has to do with the fact that there was an alley in close proximity to the site, but it also has to do with the fact that project sponsor, the architects, and the neighborhood all agreed on something which is very unique, the mid-block passage, which was always something that was initiated by the planning department. And I think that it created for an exciting project. The design itself revolves around the mid-block passage, but it also includes, what's interesting is the neighborhood itself. If you look at the slide on the screen now, what you'll find in this neighborhood is a sort of a unique quality of warehouses and residential structures, Edwardian work housing types of buildings as well as warehouses. And one of the things that we wanted to do with our design, which I think is very important, is how do we combine these two elements together to come up with a very unique idea. These are just pictures of the neighborhood, which you could see it's a combination of residential buildings, small warehouses, different colors, some metal, some brick, horizontal siding for the residential buildings. So we basically incorporated a lot of these ideas into the design. So here you have the concept. It's basically, the idea was trying to see if we can come up with a scalable building that can have correlations to the existing residential buildings, and then something that mimicked also the warehouse type. This diagram is our first diagram that we came up with, and what we wanted to do was really find a way to incorporate the mid-block passage into the overall urban design. Adjacent to the project, there is a warehouse, and as you can see from the diagram, what we basically did is mimic that warehouse idea on the opposite side of the mid-block passage, and then filled in the rest with sort of a residential, a scalable context. Here's an overall site plan of how we went from the existing site plan, which was a full block infill, to a mid-block passage with a sort of a U-shaped building. And then here you have, oh, sorry, I went back. Basically, I wanted to show you the ground floor plan. What's also unique about the plan is that on the ground floor, all the residential units are entered from the ground floor. The mid-block passage also, not just a passageway for pedestrians, but it also works as an entry point for the main lobby to the building. So we really wanted to use that mid-block passage as an activated space throughout the day. It's basically 24/7 open passageway with the lobby in the center. What's unique about what we've worked on with the neighborhood is really setting back. We set back all the entries along both sidewalks, and the mid-block passage is approximately 30 feet wide as you go through it. The second, third, and fourth floor are identical, and other than the top floor sets back again. Although we had a 40-foot height limit, we worked with the neighborhood on setting back a lot of the elements in order to give a little bit more, keeping in scale with some of the buildings that exist there. Here you have a series of renderings. Again, you could see the articulation of what we refer to as the warehouse-style building versus the residential building, and how that incorporates and adjusts to the context of the neighborhood. The entryways pushed back. We have some greenery, planters along the entryways to create some privacy for each of the entry points. It's a very well-lit plan that we've come up with in order to make a safety zone for the residents. Another view from Tennessee. We worked very hard with closely with the residents on really incorporating double sash windows for some of the residential units, and again in keeping with some of the historic qualities of the residential buildings in the area. And here you have what we refer to as the warehouse-like element, also residential, and the passageway adjacent to that. Our landscape design is fairly well executed. One of the things that we wanted to do with our landscaper is not create a space that was just a thoroughfare, but more of a meandering sort of park-like element that has planters on both sides, yet you can see all the way across, but there's intrigue. We also feel that this might be a really great opportunity for art pieces to be incorporated into the space along the way. Planting along the edges as well on both streetscapes. And here you have, and this would also be, what we're thinking is some overhead lighting. So it really requires a more, something that you may see in Maiden Lane right now, has lighting across its way, something that you find in Europe, a very pedestrian-like atmosphere. And then with that, I'd like to conclude on this slide. I think this was a project that took a while to get through, but working closely with DNA, I think we were all very excited about how this project turned out, the quality, and the idea of the mid-block passage being a place for residents as well as the neighborhood. So with that, I thank you, and this being probably my last hearing for the year, I'd like to wish you all a happy new year and happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, opening it up to public comment. Okay, not seeing any. Public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Escalvo, would you put up the ground floor plan and just speak briefly how you jiggled the residential ground floor guidelines with respect to privacy? I'd just like to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think pushing back both all the facades along the street, pushing those inward and creating planters at each of the entry locations allows two things. One is it basically isolates each of the doors so that there is a sort of a kind of a unique sort of niche for each of the doorways. Also, the planters come up about 24 inches, which controls the amount of glazing that comes down to the ground floor. That happens both on Tennessee and Minnesota. And fortunately enough, on the passageway, we have much more distance, and we create a greater planter area in front of each of the units. The idea for the ground floor is the potential of someone that really wants to be able to also use it as a kind of a place where they may work on occasion and have it as a sort of an idea of being able to have that kind of a front door accessibility to the neighborhood as well as a living environment.
Would you mind a moment, for the Commission, ground floor units typically, based on residential design guidelines, are to be lifted above grade by 36 inches. In this particular case, given your height limit, you're holding the unit back, but could you give us a dimensional reference, because the drawings did not clearly explain that to me?
The ground floor is set back 5 feet.
5 feet.
5 feet on both Minnesota and Tennessee.
And then you have the planter.
And then we have
there's an element of privacy just in those 5 feet.
Right.
That is a sidewalk, the inner sidewalk line.
Yes.
There's curb, sidewalk, and then 5 feet.
Yeah.
I consider that to be sufficient.
Yeah, and well, fortunately enough, the sidewalks here are gracious. They're not tight on both streets, so we have enough space.
Otherwise, just as a comment, otherwise I think it's a really well-designed project. I love its fit, and I wish we had more projects like it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I also like this project. I'll go against orthodoxy and say I wish we were 2 stories taller, because I think it's great. Looks like a good product, good for the neighborhood. I was going to have similar comments as Commissioner Moore to the ground floor units. That's something that we have been highlighting over the past year with many of our projects, given the reality that, a lot of ground floor units, you think that's going to create, a sense of community, but people just tend to keep their shades down, and it's almost a blank wall, almost as much of a blank wall as having a parking lot there. So holding it back might help mitigate some of that. The other thing that helps, I know that we are going to consider some language here around how to incorporate in-kind agreement into our conditions.
Correct. So I actually think the Commission should make a finding under the infrastructure, just stating that the project sponsor intends to pursue an in-kind agreement rather than a strict condition of approval in this instance. Since it's a process that follows your approval, it's probably better to restate the project sponsor's intent in this case.
Okay, thanks. Because I was following that email chain, and I thought we were going for conditions. We got it. New findings. To finish out my comment, though, so I guess we'll go with findings. That makes sense. I appreciate the potential for the in-kind agreement and some of the pedestrian streetscape changes that would result from it. But really, the best way to increase pedestrian safety is to have more pedestrians. And this is, and this is something where I don't know that I'm going to push for it on this project, although I have mentioned it in relation to this project, but we need to see more ground floor active uses. I won't necessarily say retail because 3rd Street is 1 block from Tennessee Street, and so there's, you can make the argument that it would be tough for retail to survive in a new space 1 block away from, 3rd and 20th, 3rd and 21st. However, this is, all this pedestrian streetscape changes in the world aren't going to help if you don't have anyone walking down that block because there's nothing there to do and there's no public access to anything. I know you have a mid-block open passageway, but I would strongly consider, is there any way to do more programming in terms of like park benches or something with the arts, just something so that people are in and around that site, because that's going to be the best way to create energy in the neighborhood and increase pedestrian safety. So I just want to make that comment, and definitely for commissioners for other projects that are coming down the pike, I will be pushing for more actual retail. I just think in this particular location, it's a little bit saturated being right near that 3rd Street, 20th and 21st corridor.
Commissioner Moore.
I think there is a moment to acknowledge the dog patch neighborhood. Working with the architect, I think it is creating significant results here, because instead of fighting this out here in front of us, that type of on-the-ground input, I think, has created a remarkable result, particularly because it is basically a block of Pier 70 and the historic district there. So I think not trying to argue about height or taller elements or whatever, I think is just absolutely a perfect formula to hold this up as an example of how we should be doing this kind of work and what general attitude we should do when we look at the transformation of the area at large. So I appreciate the very focused work of the dog patch, the department, as well as the architect. I have one question of curiosity, and I'm not sure if it's inappropriate to ask. I'd like to know what oryx means. Is that a gazelle or an animal? Because I see this beautiful logo, and I don't know anybody to ask of what that means, if you don't mind.
It is a rare African antelope, actually.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a gazelle. I should have Googled it, but I didn't get around to it.
Commissioner Richards.
I think it's a great project as well. Good work with the community, echoing what the other commissioners said. And to piggyback off what Commissioner Johnson said, not for this project, but for future ones, active ground floor uses don't have to be strict retail. They can be a yoga studio, something where just people are going to be gathering and using the facility throughout the day. So I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to approve this matter with conditions, Commissioner Hillis.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commissioner President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. Motion passes unanimously 7-0 and places you on general public comment, for which I have no speaker cards.
General public comment.
Regarding Sue Hester, regarding the young man from West Portal, your rules are like the Board of Supervisors rules. The rules provide you can rescind a vote, and the normal thing is people ask if the other side is still here, rather than just tell people to go away. It's your rules. It happens. Everyone who watches the Board of Supervisors meetings or attends the Board of Supervisors meeting see them rescind votes practically every meeting. It's not unusual. A person from the public or a person from the board may have been absent and they want to go back and hear things. So you have the responsibility to know your own rules, commissioners, all 7 of you, not just the commission secretary. And when people are told to go away and not even told that your rules provide an alternative, it's disappointing. So I'm asking you to, over the holidays, read your rules. You will find out I'm not telling you a lie. It's in your rules. There is a provision for rescinding a vote and going backwards, and the normal courtesy is to say, is the other side still here? And if the other side is still here, you normally rescind them. Pardon me, I'm being obnoxious in your eyes, I'm sure. But it really bothered me, and I just kept my mouth shut. But that's what public comments are for. Thank
Is there
you.
any additional public comment? Okay, meeting's adjourned.